This is the Hyosung Aquila GV300S. It's a V-twin 300cc motorcycle, and in this video I'm going to give it a full and thorough review. The Hyosung starts at £4,299 in the UK, plus on the road charges, and this bike is really aimed at the A2 class rider. So someone like myself, someone who's 19 years old, who's just done their A2 licence and wants to ride a V-twin but doesn't have the money for a Harley-Davidson and doesn't want to have to restrict it, this is kind of aimed at you. So let me tell you from a Harley rider's point of view what I think of it. The liquid-cooled V-twin that's in this bike produces 21.6 kilowatts or 29 brake horsepower at 8,500 RPM and 25.5 newton meters of torque at 6,500 RPM. And this engine does feel very smooth. It pulls through pretty much all of the rev range, and it does feel reasonably swift. Considering it's only a 300cc, and comparing it to the 350 Meteor that I've just ridden, which only had 21 horsepower or something like that, 20.2 I believe. This does feel a little bit more powerful because it has got a little bit more power, but they are very different motorcycles. But yes, this engine seems pretty good. Now, Hyosung claim that this bike brings a distinctive power and Sportster styling to the A2 riding class. Now, that is somewhat true. I think it's brought the Sportster styling from the Harley-Davidson. It's very similar. But the V-twin, as it's a liquid-cooled V-twin, is much smaller. It doesn't give you that kind of rumble and soul as you get from a Harley-Davidson. You don't get that. It's very much a smoother engine, which is great for being smooth through the rev range, but it doesn't give you that drama that you get from a Harley-Davidson. It's got front and rear monoshock suspension and ABS as standard, and it does handle pretty nicely. It's not as easy to chuck in the corners as the Royal Enfield was, but that'll be down to these nice big chunky tyres that give it that mean look. So whenever you get a bobber style motorcycle, they don't handle as well as the kind of more classic looking bikes or the sportier bikes, but boy do they look cool. You've got a matte black 2-into-1 exhaust system, and as standard it doesn't sound particularly throaty, as with any bike, because you've got to go through all the emission laws and the regulations, and that means that, you know, even the Harley-Davidsons as standard, they don't sound very fruity. So I'd like to hear this bike with an aftermarket exhaust. I don't know if they do any, but it would be interesting to hear. The 6-speed gearbox that's in this bike is very nice and smooth. I will say I think the shifter peg is perhaps not the strongest quality of metal. It seems a little bit kind of soft metal, kind of a little bit more flimsy than some of the other bikes, but it's perfectly okay, and for the price you can't really complain. Seriously? Are you joking? Yes, I'm trying to film. What are you doing? You've got single disc brakes on the front and the rear of this bike, and the stopping power is okay. It's not great, but it's adequate for this type of bike. So I'll put a little clip in now of me slamming the brakes on. got a 12.5 litre fuel tank, which is probably a decent sized tank, and with the size of the engine you probably get, it doesn't state the miles per gallon, but you probably get decent miles per gallon out of it, so that'll get you a fair way. Now, before we carry on with the video, make sure you like and subscribe. It helps us out massively, and leave your comments below. Would you buy this motorcycle instead of a Harley-Davidson, or would you just save up and do a little bit of waiting? It'd be interesting to know what you think on that one. The Aquila has a wheelbase of 1,425 millimeters, and they don't state a seat height for this bike, but by sitting on it, I am 6'1", I got it right this time, and this bike, if I'm honest, it feels okay. It does actually feel a little bit small when I'm riding it, and this seat kind of wants to push you forward, so I end up kind of squashing my gentleman's sausage, and it can actually be quite painful at times. So if you are above 6 foot, this bike might be a little bit too small for you, so that is something to watch out for. If you're below 6 foot, probably 5'5" to 5'8" would be the perfect height for this bike. I'm probably a little bit small for it, and to let me know in the comments section below, does this bike look too small for me when I'm sitting on it? It'd be interesting to see your thoughts. It weighs 172 kilograms, so it's certainly a light motorcycle, definitely a lot lighter than the Harley-Davidsons, so by a good 50 kilograms or more. So it does feel light. It's very easy to manoeuvre. The turning circle's remarkably good actually. I turned it around in a single track lane and it did it in one shunt. I didn't have to do a 2-point turn, so I was very impressed with that actually. And yes, so if you are a beginner, you won't have any trouble thinking, oh my god, this bike's so heavy, I'm going to drop it. That's not something you need to worry about with this bike. If you're interested in a Sportster styled motorcycle, and you bought this and you pulled up to the lights and a Harley-Davidson Iron 883 pulls alongside you with a nice sounding exhaust, are you going to think, oh, I wish I was on that? Personally, I think yes, I would think that. I'd rather be on the Harley, and that's something you've got to think about when buying this sort of bike, but you've also got to bear in mind that this is a lot cheaper than a Harley-Davidson, so if your money is an issue, this is a good alternative. But personally, I'd probably save up a little bit of money and buy a second-hand iron for, you know, 6 or 7 grand, and that will last you a few years and you'll have a lot of fun on that bike. I'm not saying this won't, but I think due to its size and its power, after a few months you might go, yeah, I want a little bit more. So that's something to bear in mind. The Hyosung, as with all the Hyosungs and Synuses, comes with a 3-year warranty, which is very reassuring. The first year is parts, labour and recovery. The second and third year are just parts only, so if a part snaps, they'll replace it for you. Obviously that doesn't include wear and tear parts like tyres, for example, but that's very reassuring to have and know that if something goes wrong, you're going to be covered. Now, something a lot of people will be worried about when buying a Chinese motorcycle is it good enough quality? I think it's reasonably good quality. I think the parts that need to be good quality are, but as the price would dictate, they have kind of gone for a little bit cheaper parts elsewhere. So plastic, 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 plastic. There's a lot of plastic. So instead of when you buy a Harley-Davidson or maybe a Honda Rebel, you get metal parts everywhere, nice quality metal, quality rear fender. Whereas this is plastic, so you know, if you have an accident, that's just going to snap straight away. So that's something to bear in mind. Obviously, the main components and you know things like this and everything else is made out of decent quality stuff.
Engine braking is pretty good. Keep you roughly the same speed down a hill, so that's good.
Adding on to that point about the quality, after just reviewing the Royal Enfield Meteor 350, which is an incredibly cheap motorcycle, even cheaper than this, the quality of that was definitely much better, I have to say. I don't want to seem negative about this bike because I do like it, but the quality is not as good as something as such as the Royal Enfield, and if I was to choose between the two, I'd probably choose that, even though it's a completely different type of motorcycle. So yeah, it's completely kind of something you really need to bear in mind. The mirrors on this bike are not wide enough for me. When I'm sitting on it, I can only see about 50% of the road behind me, maybe less than that. So they could do with coming out a bit wider. I think bar end mirrors would be better on this bike, but that's the way it is. Now this handcrafted seat is a 2-up seat, so if you want to carry a pillion you can, and obviously as your A2 licence will tell you, you can ride with a passenger, and you've got rear foot pegs as standard, so that's handy if you need to take someone on the back. But if you're tall like myself, you might look like a circus act trying to carry another person on the back, so if you're shorter you'll be alright, but just bear that in mind as well. If you've been watching our channel for a while, you'll know that we reviewed the 125 version of this motorcycle, which was quite interesting to see, a V-twin 125. It's probably the only one out there. So this is obviously double the size, or more than double the size, and it does feel a lot more powerful and a lot more swift. So if you've got one of the 125 versions and you're upgrading to this, you'll find it a really reasonable upgrade actually. And you won't think, oh, that's not much different. It is a much better bike, but everywhere else apart from the engine it kind of feels the same. Not much has changed. So as with the 125, it is a small motorcycle, so it's definitely not designed for tall people. So I'm probably the wrong person to ride it right now really, but I might try and get someone shorter to sit on it and see what they think of it. So in conclusion, if you're looking at this motorcycle, what should you expect? If you're a beginner, this bike would be very good for you. It's easy to ride, it's not too powerful, it's not going to catch you out, it's not particularly confidence inspiring in the corners, but it's actually alright. I think that's just to do with my height and the size of the bike. If you're expecting a Harley-Davidson Sportster, buy a Harley-Davidson Sportster. I wouldn't compare it to a Sportster because they are worlds apart. This is a completely different kind of bike. Although it's looking like a Sportster, riding wise it's not the same. And if you've just passed your A2 test and you're coming from a 125, this would be a good upgrade. And if money is an issue, it's very good value for money. But personally, I wouldn't buy the motorbike, but that's not to say you shouldn't. So definitely go and have a look at one in the flesh if you've got a local dealer. See what it's like, see what you think of it, and let me know if you disagree with anything I've said in this video.
Now this bike's actually a lot swifter than I was expecting, especially compared to the 125 version. It's got plenty of go to it actually. And I take back what I said about the cornering not being so confidence inspiring. Actually, once you get used to it, compared to the other bikes I've been riding, it's actually pretty good. Obviously it doesn't corner, you can't throw it into the corners as well as a narrow tired bike like a Royal Enfield, because it's got thick chunky bobber tyres. Oh, just pull out on me, don't look then. Stupid. But yes, it's an enjoyable bike to ride, and for the money you can't really complain about much.
Apologies if I've come across a bit negative about this bike. I don't dislike it, I do actually like it. I'm just pointing out some of the things that you need to think about if you're wanting a Sportster style of motorcycle. But if you've enjoyed the video, make sure you like and subscribe, as I said before. Comment below. I'd like to know what you think of this bike, I really would. So please let me know. If you want to help us out, buy one of our t-shirts, you can see that in the row below the video, or go to our Buy Me a Coffee. Anything that comes from that goes straight back into helping us create better videos and better content for you to watch. And I want to upgrade this camera, so that's first thing on the list from anything we get from that.